Hello, I'm Sharifa George, Public Relations Coordinator of APUA, and welcome to Necessary Conversations with APUA. Here's where we have topical discussions about matters that impact you, our customers. So for the past 8 months, APUA has implemented the COVID-19 relief efforts. This included a 10-cent reduction on fuel variation, the extension of the usual 10% discount on electricity bills to the end of the month for bills paid in full, an increase in that original 10% to 15%, and of course, the suspension of disconnection for electricity and water services. During that time, customers have been invited to visit the credit control department if they're unable to meet their monthly obligations. And this is to allow for them to liquidate their outstanding balances in what is called a payment plan. So today's Necessary Conversation is about payment plans, and joining us for Necessary Conversations is Avalyn Goodwin, Credit Controller within APUA, and welcome, Avalyn, to Necessary Conversation.
Hello, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Happy that you're able to make it. So, before we get into the conversation, to the real meat of the matter, we'd like to give our audience an opportunity to get to know who the interviewee is. And what I'd like for you to tell us is a success story from someone who's come in, had a hard time, and they were able to see their way through with a payment plan. So what's that story?
Sure. I have a few customers who have been able to get back on track through the use of the payment plans at APUA. One particular customer, I was able to assist him again this morning. He is a part of the Small Business Association, so he owns a small local hotel. And a few years ago, they were having some really difficult times keeping on top of their payments. And we were able to create a payment plan for him over a few years, as well as help him manage his current bills. So give him tips and pointers in how he can reduce consumption, both on his electricity and water services. And as a result of that, he was better able to manage his monthly bills, plus making an additional contribution towards his arrears. And now he's debt-free. He's actually paying his bills in full to the point where he is able to maximize on the discounts that we have offered during this time. So I'm very happy when we have customers like that who can now see their way through and are not burdened with, the debt, outstanding debt.
It's really nice to have a success story, because when we were speaking before, it just seems so difficult to fathom liquidating debt and still having to pay bills along with that. So just knowing that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, even if you're having a hard time, is really good to hear.
Sometimes I can imagine that it would be overwhelming for customers, especially during this period where a lot of persons aren't working or business is not as flowing as customary. So giving them that option to know that they have time, or to take that burden away from looking at it as one lump sum, but chipping away smaller payments, can really give them the confidence that they need to see their way and manage their accounts better. It also helps give them some management skills, because we really try and keep them on track through constant communication and some level of encouragement as well too.
Okay, so about the payment plans, has the payment plans come on stream, so to say, because of the COVID-19 pandemic?
No, they've always been available. It's actually something that I met when I joined APUA. So it's something that the authority has always offered to persons who are unable to pay their bills. There are different scenarios where persons would need to have a payment plan, not just non-payment of bills. Sometimes there might be an issue where a customer might have a leak at their property, or they have malfunctioning equipment, such as a refrigerator, that could cause a spike in their bill. So if on average you usually pay $100, $150 a month for your bill, and then because of this defect, you have a bill for like $500 or higher, that can be a little stressful sometimes, thinking about how you're going to be able to manage that payment, given the fact that you would have already had your monies budgeted monthly for these utilities. So those are instances where we would assist customers by giving them a little bit more time to clear that balance while maintaining their current bills.
Okay, so what is the criteria for someone, just a regular person, who would need to get a payment plan?
We generally deal with these things on a case-by-case basis because no two persons' situations are alike. In the first instance, if it's a customer who does not make any payment at all, we try to figure out when we're dialoguing with them what the cause is. If it's a situation where they just forgot, it sometimes happens, I guess, or for whatever reason they were unable to make payments, whether it was like medical incidents, or in this case of COVID-19, where they were laid off or their pay was reduced, and so they were not able to make frequent payments. We generally tend to look at customer history as a guide. So if it's somebody that you can see clearly, usually on top of things, pays their bills, it's just a freak accident or freak incident, so to speak, why they're not able to make their payments, we try to work with them as best as possible. In that situation, more than likely, we usually ask them to pay at a very minimum, at least half of the outstanding balance. And then they would have 3 to 6 months, depending on what the balance is, the amount of the balance, so it varies, to clear their balances. In the event that more time is needed, usually requires my approval or even approval from the financial controller, depending on the amounts. For persons who, like I said, it's a case-by-case situation where they might just have that one outstanding bill that has caused them to become in arrears, but all their other bills are paid. For whatever reason, they might have had a discrepancy or an issue. Then, as I said earlier, it just depends on the amount, would determine what is required. For some persons, if, let's say, for example, you have a bill that's $1,000 and you can't make the payment of 50%, which would be $500, but you can pay $200 with a commitment to pay the rest over 2 months or 3 months, then we generally work along with that person, especially if they have a good credit history of making timely payments.
Okay, I have a question. So let's say I was a customer. My stream of income has been abruptly stopped, but I also have a bad history. I don't pay regularly. I wait for disconnection to come around, and then I give you a lump sum. If this customer comes before you now, are they eligible? Because basically, if you don't have that, you're not the best candidate. But what can you do for them?
Everybody's a candidate. The authority is not in the business of suppressing people's services, because we are very sensitive of the times that we're living in now as a result of the pandemic. So we really try our best to work along with customers. Those customers will require a little bit more effort, especially for my staff, because then they would need constant monitoring. So whereas somebody who is a little bit more responsible when it comes to, or more diligent, I should say, more diligent with making payments, you would not have to give them monthly reminders because they would generally come in on time. These persons, we tend to make sure that we have a separate list that we call them every month to make sure we encourage them as well as remind them that their payments are due and to come in and make arrangements. Some persons, after you would have made that phone call, things happen, life happens, nothing is black and white. So we try to make the necessary notes. So if they ask for an additional week or so, more than likely we would oblige them.
Okay. So could you explain how a payment plan is actually developed for a customer?
As I mentioned before, the basic premise is there's an outstanding balance that needs to be cleared along with your current maintaining your bills in full each month. It's usually handled on a case-by-case basis, but the standard would be, at the very least, you pay half of that outstanding balance with an agreement to liquidate the remainder over 3 to 6 months while maintaining your current bills every month. So what we would encourage customers to do when they come in to make a payment at the cashier, to indicate to the cashier, let's say, for example, their bill for the month of November is $100, and they have an agreement to make a payment of $200 on their arrears. So every month we're expecting at the very least $200 on the arrears plus whatever their current bill is. So when they visit the cashier, they should indicate to the cashier, we're clearing the month of November in full, and then the $200 goes towards the balance. That way you can easily track their payments, and you can actually see that they're maintaining their bills in full each month while liquidating the balance.
Are there terms and conditions for a payment plan?
Meaning?
Are there clauses that they should be wary of? Are there just a set of rules that they have to follow if you decide to commit to a payment plan?
Generally speaking, there must be payment every month to satisfy that balance, plus paying your bills in full.
Okay. So the commitment or the arrangement, actually I want to use the term commitment. Is it a contract they have to sign? Or anything that formalizes the arrangement?
Yes, we have a standard document that we use where the customer is required to sign. Things have changed slightly because we're trying to control the flow of persons coming into the department. We ask for customers who are the account holders. We generally can accommodate them once the balance is not exorbitant. We generally try to accommodate them with a verbal contract. So they can make a phone call. We ask them certain pertinent questions to determine whether or not they are the account holders. And we just make a note on the account based on the information that we would have discussed, which is the payment terms for that commitment. For persons who are not the actual account holders, they would then be definitely required to come into the office because they have to sign the physical agreement form. In cases of like landlord and tenants, they have to bring their ID as well as a letter from their landlord just to indicate that they're aware that there's this balance outstanding and that, yes, they know that it is their tenant's responsibility to pay that bill, and should anything happen, it would be the responsibility of the tenant to clear that bill.
Okay, because I imagine there could be some difficulties now, especially with challenges with making payments for rent and utilities. There might be a bit of a discrepancy when it comes to landlord and tenant arrangements. Have you ever had those experiences, or have you been having those experiences lately?
Yes, we have. Because there has been a moratorium, as you said in your intro, that we have not been disconnecting customers. Once we're aware and we have their contact information, that's why it's so important when customers are having issues that they call the credit control department or even customer service and be connected to the credit control department as soon as possible so that we can set something up. Because I imagine if you're not working, it's hard to keep your bills, keep tabs on your bills, but $200 is a lot easier to find than $500 when this is all over, because they still have the responsibility to the authority to meet these obligations. So we try to encourage customers to keep a tighter control on their consumption so that their monthly bills are more manageable based on their current income, especially for persons who not at the extreme end where they're not making any money at all, but may have had reduced pay or reduced hours due to changes in work schedules. But back to the original point where they're asked to come in because they're not paying their landlord. We're primarily concerned with the payment of their utility bills. So in order to take the burden from the landlord in the unlikely event that the tenant leaves the property, having that document that says they're responsible, then we can always follow up with them after to make sure that they are staying true to their commitment of clearing those balances.
Okay, I think it's also very important that persons understand that what you see reflected in the bill is what is done in the household in terms of consumption. And if it is that we have this outstanding amount that's exorbitant, we also need to be mindful that whatever you use, you need to cut back a little bit because the cash isn't flowing quite the way they used to. And the bills are going to come, but you can play a part in controlling what comes at the end of the month.
All right.
I wanted to just clarify something. If it is that a customer would have lost their job, would they have to provide proof of that? Would you have to see a termination letter or anything?
It's not required, but if they have it, it actually adds a little bit more weight to their conversations with us. And we've been really trying to work along with persons as best as we can. It's been difficult. It's been very difficult for a lot of customers, but we have been trying our best to make sure that we provide them with pointers. 8 months is a long time for us to absorb these, outstanding balances. So we're hoping and we're trying to encourage everyone, especially if you're not able to pay your bill in full, please come in and see us so that you can make arrangements, because I imagine everybody would want to make sure that their bills are paid.
I imagine so as well. So the outstanding amount, is there any interest associated attached to that?
No, there's no interest. There's no interest accumulated on the balance. Just whatever you would have used, whatever the balance is, remains the same, and it will change as you make payments to it. The one reason why we stress it's important for you to maintain your current bills while you have an outstanding balance is because in maintaining your current bills, you're not adding to your balance and you're not being overwhelmed at the fact that you have all this money still outstanding to APUA. So we can be very flexible when it comes to the payment arrangement depending on your financial situation, but we try to make sure that it's encouraged to make sure that you're paying your bills in full every month so that you're not adding to your balances.
So let's say we have this one customer who has not been meeting his obligations. You remind them every month. We have a contract, verbal or otherwise, and they're just not doing what they're supposed to do. For whatever reason, what happens to that customer?
Well, generally speaking, my staff usually monitors those accounts. So if they would have tried several times making communication with the customer and they're not following the commitment or coming in, I would generally take over and add a little bit more weight as a controller for the department to encourage them to come in. And worst case scenario, and they're still not making any payments, not communicating, most importantly, communicating why payments are not being met, then the absolute final straw would lead to disconnection once we resume.
Okay, so Avalyn, I learned a lot about this. I think that it brings a lot of comfort to customers knowing that we're trying to support them. Yes, we've suspended disconnections. Yes, the bills are still coming, but we still want to help you even in the hardest of times. So I want to thank you so much for joining us for Necessary Conversations with APUA.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you, viewers, for joining us for Necessary Conversations, where we had a very necessary conversation, I think anyway, about payment plans. So join us next time on Facebook and YouTube for a necessary conversation about smart metering. Until then, stay safe and bye-bye.